It's time, fellas. YouTube doesn't like the cheeks, but someone has to risk their channel to teach you how to draw them. This video will probably get age restricted and shown to about 4 people. But for those 4 people, lock in, because it's time to learn how to draw anime glutes. We will start small since there's a little less moving parts, and this will serve as a good base for the rest of the tutorial. First, we want to draw a center line with a horizontal line bisecting it. Next, add some lines out on the edges to map out each side of the hip structure. Draw a shape like so. Keep the edges slightly rounded for the hips, as making them too sharp can look a little bit off. Now we can add our sides and of course the thighs. Since we are behind our character, the thighs will ride up a bit higher than from the front, since the glutes are helping round them out. So just don't bring them up to the pointed part of the hip, since they still hang down and off of it. But we still want them to rise up a little bit more, because the glute pretty much just merges with the thigh, so they'll be a little more rounded up. Also, don't forget the small gap between the thighs. Now we can add our cheeks. To get this to look correct, we want to be able to visualize how each cheek is actually hanging down off of, kind of that hip region, but obviously they're sticking out from the thigh. Okay, how you can accomplish this is keep your glute line a little bit straighter towards the top of the glute, and then really exaggerate that tuck in on the bottom portion so it helps it appear rounded. Don't forget to add the lower back muscles and the little dimples just to the sides of them, where some of these muscles are pulling the hips back and into place. Make any necessary changes, and then you can trace over with your hard lines to get your finished piece. Now we will scale up just a little bit, and we will look at the glutes from a slightly different angle. To accomplish this, we want to draw our same sort of hip shape, but we need to just imagine it getting twisted just a little bit away from us. So what I like to do is just angle that bisecting horizontal line, just angle it so the side on the left is higher than the side on the right, so it's just tilted. And then from that, you just want to balance off the hips so that everything on the left is just slightly longer and slightly bigger than everything on the right. Okay, so that's going to help the perspective to show that everything on the right of our page is further away from us, where our perspective is a little bit closer to the left. For the next step, go ahead and draw the thigh as well as your stomach on the leftmost portion of our piece. Just go ahead and leave the backside on the rightmost portion blank for now. There's going to be a lot going on there. We don't need to cover it in this step, so just go ahead, draw on the leftmost portions. Now we can talk about all the moving pieces happening over on the right. So we want to have a nice kind of sharp concave angle for the lower back to help visualize that our character is curvy. And then as for that glute line, notice again how the top portion of it is a little bit flatter, and then it really tucks in aggressively the further down the glute it goes. And that's going to help to visualize how the glute sticks out and hangs down from that hip portion. And then the reason why I like throwing in the thigh now is just because when you're first mapping everything out, it's pretty difficult to get like that hip bucket sort of shape perfect. And so because of that, you save yourself a lot of heartache by just making the glute visually look correct, and then drawing the backmost portion of your thigh off of that. If you are nasty at visualizing and you can just nail that hip structure and the perspective of it off rip, awesome. But again, its purpose is not to lock us in and force ourselves to bounce everything off of that. It's to help visualize the angle, what the shapes look like, so we can keep building and editing and construct our actual character. So for me, I don't want to drawing that thigh hanging off of the hip, because 9 times out of 10 it's not 100% in the right spot. So draw it off of the glute like this and you save yourself a lot of heartache. Then as for the center cheek line there, again, just kind of match the shape of our rightmost portion, keeping it a little bit flatter, a little bit straighter at the top, and then really exaggerate that curve and tuck there at the bottom. Just take the time to correct your anatomy, make your little bounces and changes to get the lines you want, and then you can go ahead and trace over it with your hard lines. The only noteworthy thing here that maybe wasn't quite so visual in the construction portion is notice on the rightmost area, right where the lower back connects to the glute, there's a little bump there. And that little bump is just the opposing hip that you barely see from this angle, but we still want to add that in and capture it. So don't forget the little hip bump. Other than that, should be good to go. For this next one, we're going to look at the side profile of a large bottom. So we want to still draw a sort of hip shape, again, just to bounce stuff off of it, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I like going with this one. So that way, on everything on the left here, we can kind of balance where the tummy is going to tuck in and do its thing. Everything on the back portion here will be kind of lower back. And then notice for this one how the hips are actually in the front. So that's that kind of wide V shape out by the stomach. Next, we can go ahead and add in the lower back as well as the stomach and our thighs. So for this one, for our character who's a bit heavier set, you know, she's got a larger bottom, we want to add in just a little pooch there for the stomach. We don't want to shy away from that. And then for the lower back, again, we want to capture that, you know, nice curvy shape there. So have a little concave line there, little V shape. As for the thighs, we want to balance off the front there. Nice, again, just like with any tutorial, keep the thighs nice and thick just below the hips and then have it kind of taper off as it goes down. Now, this backmost region of the thigh here is going to change. This is just a placeholder for now, just to have a line to help visualize how the glutes are going to lay, you know, all that fun stuff. I like to just throw it in and connect it to the hip structure, but this is not how her completed thigh will look. We just want a placeholder line. Now we'll draw the actual glute. So just like all the other steps, we want to keep that uppermost portion just a little bit flat and then really tuck it in and curve it towards the base. And then from there, once you get the shape you want, again, just mess with it till you get a nice glute shape. Once you get that, then you can rebalance that backmost portion of the thigh however you want. So you can see here, I didn't thicken it a whole lot. Then make whatever little corrections you need till you get the shapes and the balances you want in the construction line layer. And once finished, go ahead and draw over it with your hard lines. So now we're going to look at an all too familiar scene of a woman walking away from us. So drawing that classic hip shape that we've been using throughout the video, along with the bisecting horizontal line. And this time for this center line here, you can add just a little tiny curve to it, because at this point we've drawn enough of these glutes, you don't need just a dead straight line. Just have a super slight curve to it, like so. Next, you can go ahead and draw in the sides of your character, the thighs, and then I decided to make my center line a little bit more curved, and I even curved it in the opposite way just because I decided to have the right leg as the leg kicking off towards us, okay? That's pretty much how I like to do it. If you went with the left leg, you can have the concave line facing left, or in this case, I have the right leg coming back towards us, so my concave line is coming in towards the right a little bit. And that will make more sense once we actually draw the glute, so it'll just kind of flow into it. Now we can actually draw the cheeks. So for this one, we kind of want to further exaggerate on this left leg how the glute is not just hanging down, but it's actually stretching a little bit just because that leg is pulling it forward. So kind of make it more into a teardrop shape, right? So you don't want it to be quite as perky. Now you still want to keep that same logic where the top line is a little bit flatter and then it really tapers off and tucks in at the base. So it's still going to be tucked in, but we're not going to exaggerate that like we've been in the other ones because it's getting stretched away from us. Now the cheek on the right is pretty much doing the exact opposite. Because this leg is kicking towards us and the glute is contracting to pull it into that position, we want to really keep this cheek higher and more rounded. Now, notice how the base of the cheek is not all that different from the base on the left cheek, but this time we want it actually to have a concave line facing upwards like so. And that's just because our thigh is rounded. So when it's kicked back towards us, the cheek itself is not going to be laying flat. It's actually going to be, you know, riding the sort of thigh. So we want to keep the thigh's shape in mind when we're shaping our glute and keep the main mass of the glute a bit higher than what we've been doing. Because again, since this glute is contracted, and it's pulling that leg up. The thickest part of the glute is going to be a bit higher in this cheek than it's been in any of our other examples. Then after you make any little changes you need, you can go ahead and finish with some hard line. Only noteworthy thing here is, again, we still want to have just a little bit of pokes of the hips coming out from this angle, even on our glute that is nice and contracted and really pulling things up. But in this, when it's all cleaned up, you can really see the overall shapes of the glutes. So the glute on the left has its mass further down, like the majority of its mass further down than in previous examples, because it's getting stretched down and away from us. Whereas the glute on the right actually has the majority of its mass up higher than in the other examples, because it is contracting and pulling that leg back. Now we'll take a look at what the glutes look like on a waifu doing the splits. Just like in all the other steps here, we want to just go with the traditional sort of hip shape that we've been using. Bisect the center line with a horizontal line, and this time it is okay to go with just a straight up and down line. We can balance off of it differently if we want, but for the most part, for doing the splits from this angle, everything's going to be pretty linear. Now we can add in our thighs. So again, just similar to the second example that I gave in this tutorial, when there's a lot of stuff going on with the glutes and how they interact with the thighs, I just leave that area blank so I can get the glute to look right and then just connect the thigh to it. So for this, what we can do though is this uppermost portion of our thighs, draw those in, and notice how these things are almost coming up to the points of the hips, and that's because from this angle, all that mass of the thigh has to go somewhere. So instead of it just merely hanging down doing its thing, it's actually going to ride up a lot more. So go ahead and bring that thigh up further on the hips than what you're used to doing. Now we can draw the actual glutes. So this is going to be a really unique shape compared to what we've been doing, because we've got multiple factors going on. For starters, because she's doing the splits, her glutes have nowhere else to go but to get squished together, okay? So they're gonna have a much flatter center line, and they're not gonna visually look quite as wide as they might if she was just standing up doing her thing. Okay, so they're gonna be pushed together. But then on top of that, because she's sitting on the floor, the bottom line here will be a little bit flatter, kind of like normal, but all of the mass of the glute has to go somewhere. And so when something's pushing out from below, it's gonna go up. So the result of that is we want the glutes to almost look like they are squeezing together and keep it a really, really, really rounded shape there at the very top, like so. Then just go ahead and add the lower back muscles, then make any necessary changes. You can go ahead and finish. So now we can more easily see what's going on there. So I like to still keep a pretty exaggerated hourglass shape for our sort of lower back area, and that's because when she's doing the splits like this, she's kind of leaned forward just a little bit. You know, she's got to support herself with her hands, so she's going to be leaned forward just a little bit. So keep that back bent away from us. And again, just notice the different shape of the glute from what we've been doing. Keep it contracted, keep them pushed together, keep a lot of the mass of the glute up higher, and really squeeze them at the top. So now we're going to draw a pair of glutes when they are sitting down. So this time I didn't add in the hips shape or anything just yet. Went ahead, drew a cross, and then add a flat horizontal line there at the base, which will kind of serve visually as the bench or whatever it is she's sitting on. So now draw that classic sort of hip shape and keep it just above that bottommost horizontal line, just because, again, the glutes have mass of their own, the thighs have mass of their own. They're not just gonna lay completely flat underneath the hips. So keep your hips up above everything. You can always move stuff around if they're too high or they're too low, but leave room for the mass of the glutes. So I like doing all of this stuff just in the same step here, because you can pretty much accomplish this with one constant line on the left and right side. Okay, you already know we want our hourglass figure, so have a little concave line there for the lower back. Have a just tiny bump, not too exaggerated. And I've even seen for some where it's like you can just go ahead and leave that bump out if you want. I included it just because I like the hip bump, but add a little hip bump there. And then for the glute, similar to in our splits, you have to really think about how the flat structure she's sitting on is going to affect them. We need to imagine how this sort of soft muscle is going to react when it is pressed up against a object. In this case, the mass of the glute is going to spill out to the side slightly. So it'll still have that sort of shape that we've been used to doing, but we're going to exaggerate it and draw it out a little bit further, wider, not quite just hanging down. You don't want to make the glute bigger, right? You want, if you're drawing a character and you're trying to keep them with a consistent anatomy, you want to make sure that you're not making their cheek magically 30% bigger. You just have to ask yourself when they're walking around doing their thing and that you have them drawn up with the glute size that you want, if they go and they sit down on something, that size isn't going to actually change, but all of the muscle has to move around that object and go somewhere. So in this case, push them out a little bit, keep them a little bit flat at the top like normal, really tuck them in. Don't be afraid to keep this bottom line a little bit flatter than what we've been doing because she's sitting on a flat object. But again, you don't want it completely flat because the glute itself is round. So have a slightly rounded edge there at the bottom, keep them nice and thick just above where it really tucks in, and you should be good to go. Then we can add in just some little details here. So again, the sort of middle cheek line here, keep it relatively flat compared to some of these other ones, just because when she's sitting down like this, her glutes are going to be kind of squished up against each other. Now, there's nothing pushing on them from the side, so it's not like it's going to be extreme, but keep it just a little bit flatter. We don't want to over exaggerate the roundness for this angle. And then again, just add in your little lower back line and the little dimples for all those little muscles doing stuff. Now, adding thighs from this angle is optional. I figured I would do it because it's pretty hard to get it to look right, truth be told. And honestly, you don't even have to do it because depending on the perspective and the angle, you might not even really be able to see the thighs from behind the glutes. So whether or not you want to add thighs, up to you. I figured I would show it just because it's harder to make that look right. So I figured I'd at least show you how to do it if you wanted to. So for now, I just added in some thigh shapes. And again, kind of the same sort of idea with the glutes. Because they're sitting on a hardened object, we don't want them to just be like, have just a super rounded, thick look to them. We kind of want to flatten them out at the base and spill some of the thighs meat off to the sides. So they're still going to be round, they'll still be thick, but we want the majority of the mass to be kind of just before it really tucks up and lays flat against the bench. Then after you make a couple quick adjustments, do whatever you got to do to make sure the symmetry is good, stuff like that. You can go ahead, add your hard lines, and it should look something like this. So for this next pose, we're going to have her laying down on her stomach. This is going to be a very unique angle, so there's going to be a lot of new things going on. So for now, we'll start super simple, just draw across like this. For this portion here, we want to add in our little hip placeholder. At this angle, I like to basically draw an oval and then flatten the left and right edges of it, just so that way that's kind of that hip portion that is actually visible. So keep that a little bit flatter, and then you can give yourself some space here in the middle to work with. It's okay if the shape isn't perfect or if it has to change a lot. This is just a placeholder. This is a unique position and be hard to kind of balance things off of it. This is the shape I like to use to help give myself space and to visualize where the visible portions of the hips are and where everything else kind of has room to play around. For the thighs in this one, again, they're coming towards us, so the knee joints would be a lot thicker than what we're used to drawing them as. But we still want to actually keep that sort of tapering of the thigh visible. In this one, I just have the thighs like cut off right now just because, you know, we're just looking at the glutes, so we don't care about what the knee is doing at the moment. But essentially, give yourself a nice big knee joint to sort of balance everything off of. And you still want to have a little bit of tapering, but because the knee is so close to us, it's not going to be super, super exaggerated. Leave yourself space between the thighs, just kind of shape them like this. You can kind of draw like a underwear shape, kind of like what I did, to just kind of help visualize the space that has to be created for in between the legs. As for the actual cheeks of the glute, what we want to go for now is keep a nice rounded shape for the base where the thigh and the glute meet. And for the cheek itself, keep it wide and do not let it get too perky. From this angle, the glute is kind of laying down over the thigh. So if it gets too perky, it'll look like she's sitting there flexing her glutes for some reason, and it'll just look a little bit off. So keep the top portion of the glute a little bit flat and just keep it wide and curve it over the thigh. Then once finished, this is kind of what it should look like. It's okay to have a little section, like a little flatter section in between each cheek, kind of like what I drew there, just because that's where the sort of lower back portion that meets into the hip girdle, it's like that part will still be visible. Again, unless she's just squeezing her cheeks for some reason, but she's not. She's just relaxing in this picture. So you can have a little section there where that's just basically the hip girdle, essentially. And then you can more easily see in this example how the cheek itself should be a little bit flatter on the top, keep it nice and wide, and it merges pretty nicely into the thigh. In fact, again, you don't even have to have this little dimple here where the glute meets the thigh. You could just have one shape. It's just, for me, I like trying to show the slightly more difficult technical thing to draw and make it look nice so you know how to draw that. An easier way to do it that'll still look correct is just, you can have the glute going straight into the thigh. You don't have to have a little dip there. And then again, leave yourself space in between for the anatomically correct bits that are there that we're not going to draw. For the last section in this tutorial video, we will look at a bikini. So first we'll start with drawing a cross like so. Then we can position our classic hip shape off of it. Then just sort of draw the outer edges of the lower back, the hips, and then of course thighs, keeping ourselves a little thigh gap in between. And just kind of going through these parts quickly because we've done this multiple times. So just draw this shape. If you've been following along in the rest of the video, you should know how. Bump. Next, draw in the lowermost portion of the glute like so. Then you can go ahead and draw the actual bottom portion of our bikini. For most anime characters, they kind of seem to have low riding bikini bottoms here, so you can mess with it if you want it high or whatever. Obviously, you can make whatever style swimsuit you want, but for this example, we're going with the classic anime example, so keeping it coming down kind of just around that hip region. It's coming down just a little bit, so it's not quite covering the entire cheek, and we just want to have some concave lines going across the cheeks because, again, these cheeks are rounded. So to have the bottom round over it for a smaller sort of bikini bottom like this, we'd have them push inwards towards that center line like so. Whereas if you had fuller bottom portions here that cover more of the cheek, you could actually have a convex line going over the cheek, and that would also look correct. Just for our character, she has a smaller bikini bottom. Now with the line art finished, we can go over a very important difference with this particular step than any of the other ones that we've done so far. And that is when you have a bikini material, which is typically a bit tighter, you know, it's kind of waterproof, stuff like that. It's going to really squeeze in on the soft sort of meat of the glute. So there on the sides, even at the hips, we want to have little tiny bumps where the sort of soft meat of the glute and just the, you know, sides in general, they're kind of getting squished in. So we don't want it to be like flat on the actual bikini bottoms portion here. We still want it to be a little bit rounded, but you just want to remember the soft meat of the character's skin and, you know, just overall the glute itself, those are going to be spilling out just a little tiny bit. So get the little tiny spillages and you should be good to go. As you can see, there are a lot of different angles and sizes of glutes to draw. However, it is important to learn how to draw them since it is critical to know the anatomy and how the body works so that when you start drawing clothing, you can lay your clothes over the body rather than warp the anatomy so your clothes with all the folds you spend hours making will work. You don't want to do that. So learn how to draw the anatomy, learn how to draw the glutes, learn how to draw the character himself, and then you can practice putting clothes over your characters. So hopefully you found this video helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. But before you click off, I only need to make sure of one last thing. Hand check.